Welcome everyone to our flexible load webinar. We're going to be talking a little bit about what our programs are, what the future holds in this space, and hear a little bit, hopefully from you all, on some questions on what those look like. Just some general housekeeping. The chat is disabled. However, we encourage you to use the Q&A function for questions. We will answer those questions at the end of the session, and we are recording. So this recording will be provided to you at the end. You'll receive a link. Just a quick overview of what we're doing today. Do brief introductions of who myself, Lisa, and Dan are. We'll do a video overview of VC's flexible load programs. We're gonna have a little bit of a panel discussion, and then we hope you ask some questions in the Q&A. We had a couple questions beforehand that we'll run through as well. The goal of this webinar is really to engage with our members and interested parties, so please do ask as many questions as you want. Just a quick overview. So we have Lisa Morris with me. She's been with VC almost 12 years now. She's our energy services planner, focused largely on our electrification programs. And if you've had a question about flexible load, chances are that you've spoken with Lisa at one point or another. We also have Dan Potter with us. He's the power planning analyst. His primary role is to get us to 100% renewable energy in an affordable and reliable way. And his secondary role is the guy who pushes the button. So when we do push these events and try and hit these peaks, Dan is the one pushing that button. And my name's Cyril Bruner. I'm the Innovation and Technology Leader. I've been with VC almost 12 years as well. I spend most of my time managing our technology efforts and also a little bit on this DER stuff. So without further ado, we're going to do a quick video overview of our flexible load programs, just to give folks a sense of what those look like and how those work.
Vermont Electric Co-op's flexible load program is designed to help the co-op save money and shift usage to times when the grid is using cleaner sources of power. The two main programs are for home batteries and electric vehicles. First, the home battery program. VEC offers an incentive to members who are willing to allow VEC to discharge their home batteries a limited number of times per year when we anticipate peak demand. This reduces the co-op's overall load during peak hours and helps reduce VEC's regional transmission and capacity costs. Participants receive a monthly bill credit. For example, a typical 5 kilowatt battery like a Tesla Powerwall receives a $32 per month credit, saving money for the participant as well as the co-op as a whole. Second is our managed electric vehicle charging program. Most members participate by requesting a free home Level 2 charger from VEC. The member installs the charger and enrolls it in our communications platform, which we use to send a signal to the charger and request that it not charge during peak times. These events occur about 10 times per month and last for 2 to 4 hours. After the event ends, the charger resumes charging like normal. Participants receive an email notification letting them know about the peak event and can opt out if they need to charge during that time period. Participants receive a free charger and an $8 per month bill credit. If a member has a Level 2 charger that isn't compatible with our communications platform, this would be any type of charger other than ChargePoint or Emporia, there are still a couple of ways to participate. The first is to set a schedule to avoid charging from 5 to 10 p.m. Monday through Friday. This is the time frame when monthly Vermont peaks and the annual New England peak typically occur. Participants can receive a $250 home charger bill credit and $8 per month if they send us a picture of the charging schedule set on their vehicle or charger app. The final way to participate in our managed charging program is to enroll a compatible vehicle in flex charging telematics. This option is best suited for Tesla, Rivian, and Hyundai drivers. Similar to the managed Level 2 charger program, participants enroll their vehicle in the telematics communications platform, which VEC uses to request that the vehicle not charge during peak times. These participants also get an email notification that allows them to opt out and an $8 per month bill credit. To sum up, you can enroll a Level 2 charger, set a schedule, or enroll an electric vehicle in VEC's managed charging program to save money and charge when electricity is cleaner. Visit vermontelectric.coop/flexible-load for more information or to enroll.
Awesome. Nice work, Lisa, on the audio. And I'm going to ask a couple questions now. So first off, first question is actually going to be a fun one, which is, would you rather skydive, Lisa and Dan, or bungee jump? Why don't you go first, Lisa?
I think I'm gonna have to be team skydiving. I've been skydiving and I think I would do it again before I would go bungee jumping because it was terrifying, but it was also exhilarating and you get awesome views. So I'm definitely team skydiving.
Nice. Dan?
And I'll choose bungee jumping just to be a little different, you know. I used to rock climb some, and learning to trust that rope system is okay. So I have faith in that, I think.
Nice, nice. I'm not going to answer that question because both of them terrify me, so I would choose neither. Cool. So let's get into it a little bit here. Dan, can you explain how VEC's flexible load programs benefit our members in the grid?
So as the video we just watched talked about a little bit, during anticipated peak periods, we ask the enrollees in our programs to either curtail demand, so to stop EV charging, or to, in the case of the batteries, to put energy back on the grid. We do that because some of our costs, drivers, transmission-related costs, and capacity-related costs, are based on VEC's peak load during 13 hours in any given year. So it's the 1 hour that the ISO New England system peaks each year, as well as the 1 hour that the Vermont system peaks each month. And our costs are based on our load in that hour. So when we lower our load in that hour by turning off EV chargers or asking batteries to put energy back on the grid, we are able to save money. And those anticipated savings are actually how we pass on that incentive to participating members. That is a portion of those savings that we expect to receive.
Awesome. A little bit on that end, Lisa, for folks interested in participating, how do they go about enrolling in these sorts of programs?
All of the forms are available on our website at the page that was shown at the end of that video. So they're all pretty simple forms, just some basic information. On the level 2 chargers, there are a few different options as we reviewed in that video. So you can request a level 2 charger. If you don't already have one, that form is available on the website. If you do have a level 2 charger, like for example, some of the vehicles now are coming with a level 2 charger. So it's already provided when you purchase the vehicle. So you can then get that $250 bill credit if you already have a level 2 charger. Or you can enroll your vehicle in the Flex charging platform so we can communicate directly with your vehicle. So those are the kind of 3 different routes, and all of those enrollment forms are available on our website.
Awesome. Are there any costs associated with participating in those programs, or is it generally free to join?
So on the battery side, it is a bring your own battery program. And so the costs associated with that are the purchase and installation of whatever battery you install in your home. And then we give you the bill credit after the fact if you enroll it in our program. And on the level 2 charger side of things, we do provide the hardware for free, that level 2 charger, but then you do still have to pay for the installation of the charger in your home, which can range quite a bit depending on what your setup is.
Actually see a question here in the chat that I'm going to ask now, just because I think it fits in. There's a question a little bit about how the Tesla battery program is, structured as it relates to the price per kilowatt. The question in particular was, as it relates to, let's say you have 2 Tesla batteries, is the reimbursement doubled from, the amount that we kind of shared originally? Maybe Dan, you can touch on that.
The short answer here is yes. If you have 2 Tesla Powerwalls and they are able to push 10 kilowatts of energy back onto the grid, you would double the example that Lisa gave in the intro video of the incentive amount, which is based on $6.40 per kW that you elect to share with VEC.
Yeah. So hopefully that answers your question, Brian. I think that was yours. If not, feel free to ask it again.
Can I just add, because we do have members ask, So it is based on kilowatt, not kilowatt hour. So those are two different numbers. And the reason that it's based on kilowatt is because it's based on how much we can lower our demand during those hours that Dan mentioned previously. So if you have 13.5 kilowatt hours in your battery, but we need to have enough that we can use that battery for like 2 to 3 hours, because we're just not that good at predicting the exact hour. So we want to be able to discharge the battery for 2 to 3 hours so that we can hopefully hit that hour that does eventually end up being the peak hour for the month or the year.
Awesome. Dan, this next one's for you. Are there specific times of day when members can shift their energy usage to have the biggest impact on VC's costs?
Generally speaking, those hours are 5 to 9 p.m. on weekdays. And the reason for that, I mean, it's relatively self-explanatory when you sit down and start to think about these things, right? Everybody comes home from work during those hours. They're turning on lights, they're cooking dinner, they're using power, they're starting the dishwasher, starting your dryer, your clothes dryer. And so everybody comes home and uses power all at the same time. So those are the hours when we traditionally expect peak demand. The other component that I'll layer on top of that is that weather really drives usage. You can imagine that your building has a much larger heating or cooling load when it is cold or hot out. And so during those same hours, 5 to 9 p.m., when it's really hot or really cold, are generally the times when you would expect to see VEC calling on these types of devices. The hard months are the shoulder months because it's still in the 5 to 9, but in October, for example, you could have a heat-driven peak day early in the month or a cold-driven peak day in the latter half of the month. And the load doesn't differentiate a whole heck of a lot between those two in the shoulder months. Think April, October, September.
Yeah, we got a question here actually from Patrick, which is on this theme. So he has a solar and power walls, and he's asking whether or not, in general, it's better to charge his EV during the day when it can be done from solar, or is it better to charge in the wee hours, presumably on the load when the grid load is lowest?
I think either of those time periods, in the middle of the day when it's really sunny or in the middle of the night when there is low load, are great times for Patrick to charge his EV.
We have one other question, it's kind of timing related. So is 13 the maximum number of times that home batteries will be discharged over the calendar year?
No, that's a good question. I'm glad you brought that up. Those are the hours that our billing is based on, our load in those hours, but we don't know what hours those are going to be in ahead of any given month, right? So what we are calling on these devices traditionally 4 to 6 times per month, trying to anticipate which hours are going to be the peak hour for the month. And because we don't know that, we're looking at the weather and trying to figure out which hours those are going to be.
Okay. Little bit on the peak load events. Lisa, this next one's for you. How do we communicate with members during those peak load times? And what should participants expect from us as it relates, or what's happening with their device during those times?
So for both the batteries and the level 2 chargers, we send an email notification. And on the batteries, it's kind of a heads up, you really shouldn't notice much of anything. If we're expecting that there could be an outage event, if we see that there's, a storm coming, something like that, we will not discharge the batteries, because we understand that the main reason that members are installing those batteries is to have them available in the event of an outage. So we will avoid those time periods, do our very best to avoid those time periods. On the charger side of things, every time we have an event, you get an email and it has a link. So if you really needed to charge during that time period, you could opt out of that particular event. Otherwise, your charger won't charge during that time period, even if your vehicle is plugged in, and then it will resume charging the minute that event is over. So you should still be able to, be fully charged the next morning. So you shouldn't notice anything different in that respect, but it won't charge during the specific time period that we've called, which is typically 2 to 4 hours.
Great. Looking ahead, Lisa, how do you see these programs evolving? It looks like I know we had chatted about this question beforehand, but we actually had a question as it relates to other DR offerings such as pool pumps. or other demand response opportunities. Can you talk a little bit about the future of the programs, what we're thinking here at VC?
Yeah, pool pumps is interesting. That's something that we haven't really talked about. I'm assuming that that would be, yeah, I was actually, heaters just popped into my head, like heat pumps for pools. So things like that, I think it could be a great opportunity to, have a flexible load offering for things like that. The challenge is always in how can we communicate with these devices? So they either need to be Wi-Fi enabled, so actually have that built into the device when it comes off the shelf, or there has to be some kind of hardware typically added. So that's why electric vehicles are a great target, because electric vehicle charging is very flexible inherently. It doesn't necessarily matter to most people if you can't charge from 5 to 10 p.m. Because your vehicle will still be fully charged when you need it. So we're really thinking about what are those use cases that are flexible, that will work for the co-op, have a larger demand. So that's actually more valuable to us to put the time and effort into building these programs. So a lot of things just don't really have a large enough demand to move the needle. And yeah, looking for that communication pathway. So those are kind of the two pieces. Does it work for the member? Does it work for VEC? And can we actually do it? So that's why we've really honed in on batteries and electric vehicle charging to date. We're looking at other options. I think one of the things that's very much on our radar that's coming soon is bidirectional charging. So that's almost melding, the battery program and electric vehicle charging, because at that point you could use your vehicle as a home battery in the event of an outage to do vehicle to home or potentially vehicle to grid, where you're actually sending energy back onto the grid, which would be similar to what we're doing right now with the home battery program. The challenge there is many vehicles actually aren't capable of bidirectional charging yet. There's more and more models coming out that are. And then another challenge is just the cost of those chargers. So right now it's in the $7,000 to $9,000 range all in for the equipment and the installation. So as those costs come down, I think that that's something we'll look very closely at adding to our program. And then on the battery side, we will be rolling out an income eligible battery program in 2025, which is being funded by a grant that we received. So we'll be communicating with members about enrolling in that program, which will be a free battery installation for income eligible members.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. Hopefully that answers your question, William. And I know we had a couple other questions on bidirectional. Happy to chat more about that if those come up. Dan, this next one's for you. How do we decide what types of manufacturers and devices to work with?
Yeah, I think this is a good follow-up to Lisa's comments about what comes next, because to layer on a third element is we need to be able to communicate with the devices, but we need to be able to do so in a way that makes economic sense for both participating members and non-participating members, all of our other members. And so what I do is I run an economic model which looks at all of the costs of the program and all of the anticipated benefits of a program that we're looking to stand up, usually over a 10-year time period, to say, does this make financial sense for VEC? Some of the costs that we're projecting are, if a particular manufacturer charges a setup fee or a per device fee to access those, we look at those costs. And scale has a really big impact there. If you have a $10,000 setup fee, for example, and you only have 5 device types, well, that $10,000 setup fee is going to quickly make that program uneconomic. Whereas if you have 100 or 200 or 300 of those device types, they may be able to cover that full setup fee. And then the benefits that we're analyzing are those that we talked about earlier, our anticipated reduction in load during those peak times and how much money that is able to save the co-op with respect to transmission and capacity costs. And then the last piece that we have to layer into that economic model is what incentive are we providing our members to try to get them to sign up to that program? And do we think that incentive will actually, change their behavior or be sufficient to entice them to enroll in the program and let us manage their device?
Great. Got lots of good questions coming in. Really appreciate folks who are asking these. The next one here from Constantine is, who pays for grid connection for sending energy back to the grid during peak hours? And what is the average price? The second question too is how does this program affect low voltage distribution circuits in positive and negative ways? I might take this one. I think it's different for the EV charger standpoint, right? There, we're just dropping load versus, the batteries, which are actually pushing back onto the grid. So we actually do an analysis here to make sure that no impacts are being seen on the distribution circuits for every battery that enters our program, actually every battery that gets connected to the grid. The primary concern there is often the distribution transformer, which is the device right outside your home. In general, we have seen little to no impacts from this kind of reverse power flow. This power system is set up to have bidirectional power flow. In general, a transformer can work either direction. So generally there's, for these sorts of programs, there's no costs to grid connection. Average price, yeah, I think we'll get answered in that. So typically, right, there's limited kind of additional connection costs for enrolling in these programs. There's obviously going to be some electrician costs. Like if you were to install a battery to get that to hook up to your house, you're going to need probably some electrician costs there, whether it's a sub panel, an emergency panel, something like that. So hopefully that answers your question, Constantine. Have we considered a pay for performance model? Basically assessing AMI data and paying the customer based on measured load shedding during peak events. It's a great question, actually. I don't know, Dan or Lisa, either of you want to take that?
And we have talked about that with respect to the home battery program, to see what those batteries are actually doing during peak events, but it becomes a kind of a large administrative burden because at least the way the platforms and the software we are utilizing for these programs currently works is that I am not able to go in and easily run a report that says this device did this during this peak time. And then we would have to take that type of report and layer it into our billing software. And so it's a technological and administrative burden currently that I think may be overcome in the next 5 to 10 years as those systems are further developed and updated. To the AMI data piece, you kind of have some of the same challenges there, but we do have our Beat the Peak program, which is an ask of members to do this voluntarily, and we have not provided any compensation on that front to date because it's really hard. In addition to pulling the AMI data, you have to have a good baseline of what their usage would have been, and that's kind of a counterfactual analysis that again, is just challenging to run.
This webinar is really focused on residential applications, but we do have a commercial industrial flex load program, which does exactly what Dan described. So we establish a baseline, and we currently have JPeak enrolled. So they have an ice rink and their water park. And so actually they basically participate in these events, reduce the amount of cooling needed for the ice rink or reduce the amount of water flow going through the pumps, right? That has a fairly significant impact. And so we're actually calculating how much did they actually shave during that time and compensating them accordingly. That's a small subset of our members, right? We have 3 folks enrolled in that program right now. I think, again, perhaps as technology advances and these capabilities advance, there might be some sort of opportunity to do that in the residential space. But for now, we've kept it in the commercial industrial space just because that's a little more complicated. Laura has several questions here. I'm going to ask another one of hers, which is if VC were able to send me a text, not email, the day of an anticipated peak, I could shift my loads accordingly without having a battery or an EV. Is there an opportunity to sign up for that? I think it's like fairly similar to our Beat the Peak piece, but maybe Dan or Lisa, you want to chat on that, talk on that a little more?
Yeah, so that is something that we do as part of the Beat the Peak program. So that's just sort of a heads up to all of our members. We really just use it to target that New England peak, which occurs once a year, and it still occurs in the summer. So that is when you may get an email, you may get a text asking you to just reduce load during a specific time period because we're thinking that it could end up being the New England peak. We have tried to use that sparingly, so we're not like constantly sending members texts and emails asking them to reduce their load during specific time periods. So we've only actually used it, as I said, in the summer to target that New England peak.
Excellent. Just filtering through here. Alan Robertson had a question. Do we have a flyer or paper outlining this program and kind of what we're doing that we can send to town planners and include in an annual town report? You know, I don't think we have something off the bat, but I'm sure, Alan, we can reach out to you after and give you a sense. You know, obviously the video that we shared is something that we put together, but we can certainly give you something in that space. Let's see here. Folks have other questions, feel free to pop them in here. We're just kind of running through these questions as we go. We kind of have picked up all the ones that we wanted to talk about. Dan, Lisa, anything you can think of? Any sort of pieces we're working on, things we're interested in that we could add to what's already been discussed?
I'll just touch on briefly. I get a lot of questions from members about why isn't this battery type, Franklin batteries or Enphase batteries, why are they not part of the battery program? And it really goes back to the answer we talked about a little bit earlier on not having an economic way to communicate with those devices, and or there only being a handful of those specific device types within our service territory that we know about. And so the economics really just don't pencil out for us to be able to enroll those device types in the program. It's not because we're picking specific OEMs that we want to work with versus we don't want to work with. That's not it. We're sort of OEM agnostic. And then the other on the home battery program, the other question I get a lot is related to the ability to opt out. So that the ability to opt out of specific events was initially a feature of our program, and it was removed because the software doesn't actually allow us to opt individual devices out of peak dispatch events anymore. And so we have built in a couple program elements that we think safeguards members' primary use case of their batteries, which is home backup. And that is, Lisa talked about a little bit earlier, but it's canceling dispatch events or just simply not scheduling them when we see a weather front moving through that has the possibility for widespread outages on our system. And the second item is that we never draw the batteries down below 20% state of charge, so that there is always some energy in those batteries available to the member.
Thanks, Dan. Any other questions folks have? We kind of have wrapped up the ones that I've seen here. There are a couple like onesie twosies that we will answer and get back to folks on directly, just because they're a little more specific to each person's needs. But if you have a more general question, by all means.
I'll just mention.
Yeah, go ahead, Lisa. Yeah.
Okay, I was just going to mention the federal tax credits that are available in both of these areas. So probably most people are familiar with the fact that there's a 30% federal tax credit for batteries. So that's the cost of the battery plus installation. But then also on the level 2 charger side, there's a $1,000 federal tax credit, which again is 30% of the installation costs that folks can apply for. And I'm not a tax expert, but my understanding is that for the installation costs, so even if we provide the charger, you could still claim the installation costs of that charger. And again, it's 30% of the cost up to $1,000.
Great. Well, I think that wraps up all the questions that I'm seeing. You know, feel free to reach out to us. We're providing our email here, support@vermontelectric.coop. It'll get routed to one of us. We'll be happy to answer any questions you have. I know there were a couple folks who had specific questions. We'll reach out and address those in particular. And looks like maybe we had one more I just saw. Next one. Does the federal tax credit left roll over? Federal tax credit left roll over. From Greg. Sure, if I understand that one, Lisa.
So the question is, I guess, can you take it over multiple years? And I don't know the answer to that question. I really don't want to provide people with bad tax advice. But we can definitely get the answer to that question and we could send it out to folks.
Great. Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time. Thanks for all the great questions and really appreciate it. Thanks everyone.